Muy bien, listo, ya vamos, son las 10 de la mañana. Vamos a leer en este momento. Por favor,
Hello,
puede poner la música
everyone.
y María Camila, ponla
Welcome.
20 segundos. Buena ponencia, regalando una sonrisa.
Gracias. Muy buenos días y muy bienvenidos al webinar
Good morning,
Gestionando
everyone, and
Residuos
welcome to this
Urbanos para
webinar,
Ciudades Más
Managing
Limpias.
Urban Waste for
Este es
Cleaner
nuestro primer
Cities,
webinar de la
which is
serie
our first webinar in the
Estrategias para
series
enfrentar la
Strategies to
polución en
Face
Ciudades de América
Pollution in
Latina y el
Cities in
Caribe.
Latin America and the Caribbean.
Soy María Camila Uribe,
My
coordinadora de la
name is
Red de
Maria
Ciudades de Bogotá,
Camila
y me complace
Uribe,
abrir este espacio por
coordinator
medio de
of the
conocimientos
IBD
donde
Network,
exploraremos
and I am going to guide you
enfoques de
through
economía circular, reciclaje
this
y
moment where
reducción de
we
emisiones,
talk about
con
circular
ejemplos
economy
concretos
and
de cómo las
emission
ciudades
reduction,
están logrando
speaking
avances
concretely about how
significativos
cities are
en la
making
reducción de su
significant
huella
advancements in
y la
reducing
mejora en la
the
calidad de
environmental
vida humana.
footprint and improving
Antes de
human
comenzar,
quality of life.
quisiera
Before we
mencionar que
start, I
el
would like to
webinar de hoy
mention
se llevará
that this webinar
principalmente
will
en
happen.
español, pero podrán oírlo en inglés o en
It will
portugués a
it will
través
be
de
it will
nuestra
be we will be
interpretación
speaking mostly
simultánea.
in Spanish, but
You can hear this webinar in
you
English
can hear
and
the
Portuguese.
you can hear
Solo
this in
tiene que
English and
hacer clic en el
Portuguese by
icono del
clicking
mundo en la parte inferior
in
de la
the
pantalla y
corresponding
escoger el idioma
option
de su preferencia.
selection in the
Just pick the
languages.
language that you want to hear in the symbol of the world down on your screen. Você pode escolher o idioma de sua preferência no símbolo do mundo na parte de baixo do menu. En caso de tener alguna pregunta para los
Should
panelistas,
you
pueden
have any
agregarla
question for
a
the
la sección de
panelists, please
Q&A en Zoom,
you can add it
y los
to the
panelistas
Q&A
responderán
section,
preguntas
and the
durante
panelists will
el
take
espacio final de la
questions
sesión.
at the end of the session.
Además, la grabación de esta
In
sesión estará
addition,
disponible en el canal de
the
YouTube
recording
y
of
de
this
podcast
session
la
will
próxima semana.
be
Pueden
available in our YouTube
encontrar
channel
el
next
link
week.
a
You
nuestro
can find the
webinar
link to our
en el chat.
YouTube channel in the chat.
Para quienes se unen
For
por
those
primera vez
joining us for the
a
first
estos
time,
espacios, la Red de Ciudades del BID es una
this
plataforma
network, the
regional que
IBD
busca
Cities Network, is
facilitar el
a regional
intercambio de
platform that
conocimientos,
aims to
soluciones y buenas prácticas entre
enable
ciudades de América Latina y
exchange
el Caribe.
of knowledge and good
Dada la
practices between
naturaleza
cities in Latin
multisectorial del
America and
desarrollo urbano,
the Caribbean.
la red genera
Given the
oportunidades de diálogo
multisectorial
entre los
nature
diferentes
of
actores del
this
sector
area,
público, privado y
it
académico
encourages
en más
the
de
participation of
250
public,
ciudades
private, and
participantes de la red,
academic sectors,
así como
as
aprovechar el
well as to
conocimiento de los
seize the
diferentes
knowledge
sectores
of the
del
different
banco. De esta manera
the
buscamos
different sectors in
contribuir
the
al
bank.
fortalecimiento
Thus,
del
we look
liderazgo
to
en la gestión urbana,
strengthen
a
leadership
la
in human
construcción de
management,
capacidades para los
to build
funcionarios
capacities
municipales
of
y a la promoción del trabajo
municipal
sinérgico
officials,
con
and to
diferentes
create synergies
instituciones
in their work
aliadas.
with the different
Para obtener
allied
más
institutions.
información o
To get more
inscribir a
information
sus ciudades en la red de
or to
ciudades, pueden seguir el
enroll
link
your
que estamos
cities into
compartiendo
the
en el chat.
network, you can
Bueno,
access the link
para
in
este
the
año
chat.
hemos programado
This
4
year,
series de webinars.
we we set
Al
four
primero, en
series. The
abril,
first was
hablamos
in
sobre el rol
April,
de las ciudades como
which was
motores
the
de la acción
role
climática.
of cities as
Luego,
engines of climate
hablamos
actions.
de
Then
las
we
estrategias que
spoke about the
podríamos,
strategies
con las cuales podríamos promover
with
la
which we
vivienda
could
social
promote
en
social
ciudades de
housing
América Latina y el Caribe.
In
Y
Latin American and
esta,
Caribbean
que estamos
cities. And
empezando
this
hoy,
one we
es
are
nuestra
doing today
tercera serie
is our
en
third
la que
series
hablaremos
where
de estrategias
we
para
will
enfrentar la
cover
polución en
strategies
las
to
ciudades
face
de la región.
pollution in Latin
Luego
America and the
tendremos en
Caribbean.
octubre nuestra última y cuarta serie.
Then in
En el
October we will have
contexto
our
de la COP
fourth
de
and last
biodiversidad que este
series
año se llevará a cabo en la
within
región, y
the
estaremos hablando sobre
biodiversity
estrategias para
COP
ciudades
COP,
biodiversas
where
y
we will be
resilientes en América
speaking about
Latina y el
strategies
Caribe.
for biodiverse and
Para
resilient
recibir las
cities in
invitaciones
the region.
y los links de registros a estas
To
series,
get
también pueden suscribirse al newsletter
registration
de la red
links for this,
de ciudades,
you can
que también vamos a compartir
enter
también
into
en
the
Zoom el link para
newsletter
llegar
for
ahí.
the network, which
Las
we will
grabaciones
also leave
también de
in the
todos
chat.
los webinars
The recordings of
anteriores
all the
que hemos
previous
tenido
webinars that we
están
have
en el
had
canal
are
de YouTube y
available in
también
our
están
YouTube
en
channel
nuestra página,
and as
en nuestra
well
página
as
web de la red
in
de
our
ciudades,
website
así como los
in
blogs
the Cities Network
relacionados con
website,
los principales temas
as well as all the
abordados que están
information
en la
regarding the
plataforma de
main
ciudades sostenibles
subjects
del BID.
covered in the
Bueno,
Sustainable Cities
ahora sí, empecemos.
repository.
A
Now,
través
let's
de esta
begin.
serie de
During
webinars
these series of
en la que
webinars,
hoy hablaremos
and
de
today where we're
estrategias de
speaking about
economía
strategies
circular, de reciclaje, de
circular
recolección
economy,
y de reutilización
recycling,
y tratamiento
and
de
reuse
residuos
and treatment of
orgánicos y
organic
reducción de
waste
emisiones en
and
vertederos,
reduction of
los gobiernos
greenhouse
locales
gas
juegan un
emissions,
rol clave
Local governments play a key role
mejorar
in
la calidad
managing
del aire.
waste to
Por lo que
improve air
esperamos que
quality,
la
which
serie
is
que
why
hoy
we
empezamos
hope that this series that we are
sea
starting
de
today
muchísima
will be
utilidad para
extremely
ustedes.
helpful
Hoy
for
nos
you.
enfocaremos en
Today, we
estrategias
will
para
focus
gestionar
on
residuos
strategies
urbanos y
to
el próximo miércoles,
manage
que es el
urban
11
waste,
de
and next
septiembre, que
Wednesday,
también
on
espero que
September
nos puedan
11th, when
acompañar,
I hope you will be able
hablaremos
to join
sobre
us,
cómo mejorar la
we will
calidad del
talk about how
aire.
to improve air quality
Entonces,
in
para
urban
empezar,
areas.
en el
To
webinar
begin,
de hoy,
to
de
begin
cómo
our webinar
gestionamos
today
residuos
on
urbanos para las ciudades más
how to
limpias,
manage urban waste for cleaner
solo
cities.
quisiera como dar un abrebocas en este sentido. En el 2021,
Just
por
to
ejemplo,
start,
cuando
in
llevamos casi un
2021,
año de
when
pandemia,
we were
nuestra
one
región
year
generó
into the pandemic, our
230
region
millones de
created
toneladas de residuos
230
sólidos,
tons of
de
solid
los
waste,
cuales el
from which
50% no se
50%
gestionó
wasn't
adecuadamente.
properly managed.
La región aporta
The region contributes
11.55% de los residuos sólidos
11.55%
globales
of
y
global
genera
solid
aproximadamente
waste
un
and generates
13.5% del metano
approximately
mundial. Todo esto
13.5% of all the
contribuye a
methane
la
in the world.
proliferación de
This
vertederos no
contributes
controlados,
to
a la emisión de
uncontrolled
gases de efecto
waste
invernadero,
areas, to
metano,
the creation
que
of
tiene un
gases such as
potencial
methane,
de
which
calentamiento
can
más de
which has
80
a
veces
warming
mayor
capacity
que el
more than
dióxido de
80 times
carbono
higher than
durante los
CO2.
20 años después
During
que
the
se libera
20
en la
years
atmósfera.
after for
Es
20 years
esencial
after it
adoptar
is
una
released
economía
into the
circular
atmosphere,
que
we need to
fomente la
adopt a
reducción de
circular economy
desperdicios, la
that
reutilización, el
aims to reduce
reciclaje y
gases
la
and
innovación
encourages
de residuos
recycling
sólidos.
and the
Hoy,
innovation
en
in the
este
management
webinar,
of solid waste.
exploraremos los desafíos y
Today, we
las
will explore
oportunidades
the
para ver
challenges
cómo
and
podemos
opportunities
gestionar
to
de
see
manera
how we
mucho más
can
efectiva
more
los
effectively
residuos sólidos
manage
en nuestras
solid
ciudades.
waste in our cities.
Presentaremos ejemplos concretos.
We will
Vamos a
present
escuchar la ciudad de
clear
México y al
examples. We will
municipio
talk about Mexico
de Santiago
City
de Río Grande do Sul,
and Santiago
mostrando
do
cómo
Rio
algunas
Grande do
ciudades
Sul,
están
and
implementando
and to
enfoques
see how
innovadores
some
en la economía
cities are
circular
using
y el reciclaje y
innovative
la reducción de
approaches in
emisiones
circular economy
asociadas
to
a la gestión
reduce
de estos residuos.
waste
Vamos a
to
discutir sobre
manage these
estrategias
waste.
claves
We
de
will talk
cómo
about key
integrar las
strategies on how to
prácticas en las
integrate
políticas
these
urbanas
practices
con
in
el
urban
objetivo de reducir la huella
policies to
y
reduce our
mejorar la
footprint
calidad de vida
and
en
improve the
nuestras
quality of
ciudades, en
life in
nuestras
our
zonas
cities
urbanas.
and our urban
Esperamos
areas.
que las experiencias de hoy
We hope that today's
sirvan de
experiences
inspiración
will
para
serve as an
desarrollar
inspiration
mejores
to
soluciones más
develop better
sostenibles y
solutions and more
replicables en
sustainable
otras ciudades de la
solutions
región.
in other cities in Latin America and
Bueno,
the
pues
Caribbean.
invito a nuestros
I would like,
participantes. Primero,
I invite our participants,
comenzaremos
first
con
of
el
all,
panel de
we will begin
conversación
with our
entre
panel
expertas para profundizar esta temática
to
y
go
contamos
deep,
aquí
delve
con
deeper into
la
this
participación de
theme.
Alfredo Rim, que será Alfredo.
Welcome, Alfredo.
Como ponentes tenemos
As
a
our
Bart
presenters,
Van
we have
Hoof, que es
Bart Van
profesor
Hoof,
asociado
who's an
de la
associate
Facultad de Administración
professor
de la
of the
Universidad de los
Administration
Andes
Faculty
en
of
Bogotá, en
Universidad de los
Colombia.
Andes in
Muy
Colombia,
bienvenido, Bart.
Bogotá,
También
Colombia.
tendremos a Eva
We will
Ringhoof,
also have
que
Eva
es jefa de
Ringhoff, who is
proyecto
the
a
head
nivel
of
circular de la cooperación alemana GIZ. Muy bienvenida,
for
Eva, también.
GIC in German
Y en la
cooperation
segunda
for
parte
the,
tendremos la
and in the second
presentación
part we will have the
de
presentation
Estefanía
of
Arriaga
case
Ramos,
studies
que es
by
la jefa
Estefania
de
Arriaga,
Medio
who is the
Ambiente
head
y
of
Gestión Sustentable de Residuos Sólidos
sustainable
de la Ciudad de México,
management
en
unit for
México.
solid waste
Bienvenida, Estefanía.
in
Y
Mexico City.
tendremos
Welcome,
también al
Estefania. And we will
prefecto,
have
al alcalde,
the,
Tiago Gorski
the mayor,
Lacerda,
Tiago
que es
Gorski
el
Lacerda,
alcalde
who
de
is the mayor of
Santiago,
Santiago, Rio
Rio
Grande do
Grande do
Sul,
Sul de Brasil.
in Brazil.
Muy bienvenido,
Be welcome
prefecto.
to all of you.
Y finalizaremos con la
Lastly,
creación de un espacio
we
para
will have
responder
our
las
Q&A
preguntas,
session
que
to
esperamos que
respond to
ustedes
any
hagan muy
queries or
activamente en el
questions
chat.
that we
Y
hope
los
you will make
animo
actively.
a escuchar esta presentación y
Please
hacer preguntas para
listen to these
profundizar sobre estos temas.
presentations so we can delve deeper
Esperamos
on all
tener
of these
una muy
subjects.
fructífera
We
discusión el
hope to
día
have
de
a
hoy.
very fruitful discussion
Y tal vez
today.
antes de comenzar,
And
me
maybe before we
gustaría
start,
que empezáramos
I
con
would
una
like to
primera
start
pregunta.
to pose a first question.
Y aquí me gustaría saber de las ciudades
Here,
de
I would like
ustedes,
to know about your
¿qué
cities.
porcentaje de los residuos sólidos creen que
What percentage of
actualmente se
solid
están
waste do you
reciclando
think is
en su
currently
ciudad,
being
en la ciudad de
recycled in
cada
your
uno?
city,
¿Cuáles creen
in each of
que es
your
ese
cities?
porcentaje que se está
What do you
reciclando
think?
en la ciudad? Los
What do
invito
you think that
a darle
percentage
clic en
might
la
be?
pantalla y a que nos cuente cada uno lo que cree en su ciudad. ¿Cuál creen
What do you
que es
think is
ese porcentaje?
the percentage?
A ver. Menos del
Less than
5%,
5%, we
o sea, la
have
mitad de nuestros
almost half
participantes.
participants,
Entre el 5 y
49%.
el
Between
15,
5 and
el
15%, we have
41%,
41%.
y más del
Over
15%,
15%, or only 10% people.
el 10% de la gente que nos
That
acompaña
is the
hoy.
breakdown of the percentages.
Bueno, pues la
So,
respuesta más votada
the
se
highest
parece un
answer
poco o no se parece un poco a esto que estamos viendo en la
resembles a
pantalla.
little
Y es
bit
que,
what we see in
de
the
acuerdo con
screen.
una publicación del BID,
According to an
hablamos que
investigation
se
by the
generaron
bank,
cerca de
we
230
saw
millones de
there were
toneladas
about
de
230 million
residuos
tons of
sólidos
solid waste
municipales en
in
el
Latin America,
2021.
in
Pues
the
un
Caribbean in
3.85%
2021, and only
es lo que
3.85%
se
of that
recicla.
solid waste is
Qué
recycled.
interesante
Less than 5%.
con nuestras respuestas de los participantes de
And
hoy.
it's interesting to see that
Los
compared with
invito a
the
que
responses
hagamos
of our
la
participants. I
segunda
invite you
y
to make
última
the
pregunta
second question and the last
para
question.
nuestra audiencia. En tu
So,
opinión,
in your
¿cuán
opinion,
relevante
how
crees que es
relevant
la
is the
coordinación entre los
coordination between
diferentes niveles de gobierno
the
para
different
enfrentar el
government
cambio
levels to
climático
face
en las
climate
ciudades?
change in options?
En
It
la
is a single
prevención de
option
generación
in
de
the
residuos
prevention
o
of
más
waste
en la
generation,
erradicación o
or
en el
more in
reciclaje
waste
o en la
collection,
rendición
or
final?
in recycling, or
¿Cuál
in
cree
final
que es,
disposition. Final disposition, yes.
cuáles
What do you think is
son más relevantes?
the most relevant option among these?
A ver.
Let's see.
Bueno,
Well,
prevención de generación de
prevention of
residuos es
waste
la
generation
favorita.
is a favorite at
Luego la reducción de
44%,
residuos
and
y
waste
disposición
regulation
final. Y de
and final
últimas, el
disposition. And
reciclaje. ¿Usted
dead
piensa
last
que
is
el reciclaje
recycling.
también
I
tenemos
see
un
you think
rol
that in
más
recycling
activo
we have a
todos,
more
todos
active
los
role
ciudadanos? Bueno,
for all
pues
of
es
us
relevante
citizens.
enfocar los
It
esfuerzos
is
en
relevant to
todas las
focus
etapas, en la
efforts
extracción,
in
en la
all
producción y en
phase,
la
in
disposición.
extraction,
La economía
production,
circular
useful, and
fomenta
disposition.
la
Circular economy
reducción de
encourages the
desperdicios,
reduction of
la
waste,
reutilización,
the
el
reuse,
reemplazo y la
recycling, and
innovación
innovation
de
in
la gestión de todos
and
estos
waste
residuos.
management.
Bueno, pues creo que con estos abrebocas
And
del
with
día de
this
hoy me complace pasarle la
introduction, I am
palabra
more than
a mi
glad to
colega
give the
Alfredo
floor
Rin, quien
to
hoy
Alfredo Ring,
moderará
my
esta
colleague, who
sesión.
will now be moderating the session
Como ya
today.
mencioné antes,
As I
Alfredo
mentioned
es
earlier,
especialista senior de la
he's a
División de
senior
Agua y
specialist in
Saneamiento
the
del BID
water
y
and
muy
sanitation
bienvenido. Le doy
area
la
of the
palabra siempre,
bank.
Alfredo.
And now,
Gracias por
Alfredo, come on
acompañarnos.
in. Thank you for joining
Muchas
us.
gracias, buenos días.
Good morning.
Voy
Thank you,
voy a
Maria
hacer una
Camila.
pequeña
First,
presentación
I'm going to make a short
de las actividades que
presentation
hacemos
about the
nosotros
activities that we
como
carry out
banco en el sector de residuos
as a
sólidos
bank
y de ahí
to
inmediatamente
manage solid
pasamos al
waste.
resto de las actividades
And then we
con
will move
los
on to the
presentes
other activities
presentadores
with
y
our
colegas.
presenters and
¿Se ve
colleagues.
como pantalla completa?
Can you see my whole
Sí,
screen?
ahí te estamos
Yes.
viendo bien.
Perfecto. Listo. Muchas gracias. Voy a partir.
Thank you very
Mi
much.
nombre es Alfredo Rines.
I am Alfredo
Trabajo
Rim.
en la división de agua y
I
saneamiento del
am
banco en el
and
sector ecológico,
in the water
al
and
frente del
sanitation
sector de
area
residuos
of the
sólidos del
bank,
banco y
and
apoyamos la coordinación
and
de
we
las
support the
tareas
coordination with
en
of
esta
our
zona importante
portfolio in
para
this
la
sector
región
for
del Caribe.
all of America, Latin
Básicamente,
America,
quiero
and the
contarles
Caribbean.
muy brevemente
I want to
una
tell you
descripción de las
very
actividades del
briefly
grupo
or a
hídrico por
description of
diferentes
our
entes, no
activities
solamente el sector público, que
in
también
the
tiene,
IBD
digamos, acá
group.
presentes,
It's not
sino
just the
hay
public
colegas del
sector
sector
here, but
privado,
also
tanto
colleagues from the
hábitats verdes, que atienden también
the private sector,
necesidades
who also
y
cover
elementos de
needs
desarrollo
and
de esa
elements for the
perspectiva.
development of that
El
perspective.
contexto regional ya se explicó,
The
aquí
regional
estamos
context has
viendo
already been
las
explained. This
cifras
is
que
the
recién María
a
Camila
few of the numbers that Maria
comentaba.
Camila
Hay
just
un
mentioned.
QR de un sitio
There's
web que
a
tenemos
QR for
en
us,
la
a
plataforma de
website that will lead
coordinación
you to
de
an
gestión de
information
residuos sólidos del
platform that
BID,
we,
que es el que dio pie a la publicación que se hizo
and you will
referencia
see
después.
the
Les invito a visitarlo.
publication
Es
that was made
una iniciativa
in this area.
dinámica y que estamos muy orgullosos
It's a very
de
dynamic
su actividad
initiative,
de reservorio
and
regional
we have as our
de representación de
regional
residuos en la
reservoir
región.
of the entire
Es
situation in the region.
interesante como
It is
esfuerzo en el
very
sentido que
interesting
no es
as an
solamente una
effort that in
publicación
that
meramente
it's not
puntual,
just a
sino que nos gusta estar marcando una red
publication, but that we are
con los
aiming to
países para
create a
mantener este
network with the
sistema
countries to
en
sustain
actualización de forma
the
dinámica.
system
Estos
and to
15
keep it
años de la era
updated.
difícil, actualmente no todos, pero muchos países ya están
Currently,
generando
most but not all
sistemas de
countries are
reporte con distintas
generating
intenciones,
reporting
algunos para reportar a la
systems
OCDE y otros
to
para
report
reportar
to the
temas ambientales
OECD
o
and
otros
to
para
environmental bodies,
ya
and
más
others
avanzados para
to,
ver su
or
cumplimiento
more
de sus metas
advanced,
de reciclaje o
to
de
meet their
economía
recycling
circular.
goals,
Aquí los números
or
ya
to
se
create
mencionaron,
circular
básicamente
economy.
lo que
So
está
some of the
arriba
numbers
a la
were already
derecha
mentioned.
son
So
los
you have
residuos
on
bien
the top
manejados,
left,
los residuos
the
bien
picture at the
manejados,
top right
la
is
deuda que tiene la
properly
región
managed
es baja,
waste,
4%, y hay
which is
espacio
at
de oportunidad
4%. Only
relevante.
4% of the
Y
countries do
cuando
that.
hablamos de disposición final,
And when we talk about final disposition, only a limited percentage of landfills. At the bottom right, we have badly managed waste. So we see how waste is collected and how it is managed. So for the waste for which we have no details is actually greater. It's almost 16%, as you see. And now, in addition to the more traditional elements for waste, for environmental protection and logistics, we have some aspects that have given a thrust to this sector. First is circular economy, which is breaking with the circle in the entire waste management cycle. And some of our presenters are going to cover that, and climate change, which has created raised a big problem in this area. Today, we're going to be talking about urban solid waste. Even though solid waste encompasses a lot more. For the public sector, we are going to focus more in the government relations, particularly municipal or municipal authorities. In two great lines, we have loan operations, which is more about infrastructure in construction or generation of facilities to manage and dispose of waste, and technical cooperation, which is the creation of regulation and design and so on. These are the two large axes that we're going to be covering today. This is the public sector. The private sector can also join in these two lines. And in the IBD lab, which is more technical, and they work more with the innovation. We have a very large operations portfolio. This is a procurement that is more present in the last region, and we have a greater momentum and more interest insisting again in the interest of circular economy and to fight climate change, which are goals that didn't exist before. We have numbers, which is in Chile, as you see here, which has set clear goals for the level of recycling that is expected for the sector. These are the technical cooperations in the sector that we are currently working on. And then to finish the introduction of what the bank does, we have another QR for publication. We work with a mix of proposal and demand regarding the bank's vision regarding how to solve the waste problem. We also have 5 guidelines that are key to ensure or achieve success on what we are doing. Universal access to a proper service management, which is traditional, but no less relevant because of that. And number 2, decarbonization and climate adaptation, citizenship as an engine of change, because of the human factor, which is very important in collaborating and using the services, a strong governance framework, and financing sustainability. On how much do we need to do, or what we need to do, we have some success cases. We did an exercise of how much we needed to spend to achieve these numbers, which is a yearly number, first of $4.2 billion a year to achieve proper waste management circularity. And when divided by number of people, we are talking of a number of over $1 per person. It's an achievable goal. And to be close, in the bank, we do many things, many activities such as this. We're trying to visually unify and strategically all of our operations, but we have the Too Good to Waste slogan as an umbrella, which is an initiative that is working with controlling methane and waste management. We have all of our platforms. Latitude R, which you can see here. We also have the Desperdicio. We work with other coalitions, the Circular Economy Coalition, as you can see down there. And then GIRSU rating, and then we have which is a clear topic. With that, I stop my presentation and now give the floor. And I invite Eva Linhart and Bart so that they begin. We have about 20 minutes per person at the end for questions. To properly understand what are your advices to face the challenges in the sector. Now, first, Bart, thank you for being here. He's an associate professor at the Universidad Nacional de Colombia, and he also works in the various projects with the bank and is helping us for current projects. First, Bart, and then we go with Eva for questions. Bart, go ahead. First question, what are the main challenges in solid waste management facing Latin American cities and the Caribbean today?
Thank you, Alfredo, and thank you for this invitation to participate in this incredibly interesting seminar. With regards to the challenges, I think we have already spoken about many of these in the introduction. But I think when it comes to domestic or urban solid waste, the main challenge that we are facing is the fact that we need to basically create less waste. And there are different ways to do this. And so, when it comes to this first issue, we have to actually prevent the creation of waste. I'm sure that we will discuss this during today's event. We also need to make better use of our waste. We have a lot of raw material or waste that could rather be converted into raw material for subsequent processes. And as the figures show, in the region, what we need to do is we ensure the expansion of waste management services. Almost 50% of our waste is inadequately handled when it comes to its final disposal. We have several dimensions and disciplines to take into account when we look at these challenges. That is a challenge itself. I work in a faculty of administration. I am an engineer by training. And when it comes to administration, we must always work in a multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary fashion. And clearly, the first challenge that we have with waste is a biophysical issue. This is a biophysical issue, and we are talking about huge volumes, tons and tons of waste. So it's a biophysical issue at the end of the day. And when it comes to the biophysical challenge, we don't have adequate waste management. And above all else, this is a biophysical issue because we have enormous quantities of waste that are being created that then have vectors or create vectors that end up in health risks for the general population. We also have the issue of greenhouse gases that are created by waste, and again, the biophysical issue. We also have technological challenges related to waste management. Here I make reference to the necessary and efficient technologies for appropriate waste management.
una pregunta de entrada, pero una infraestructura de gestión
And
integral
we
que
also have
garantice una
issues
separación
with
adecuada que incluya la
integrated
recolección de los
infrastructure for waste
contenedores
management, starting
adecuados, los
with waste
camiones, las
collection,
tecnologías y la
having
frecuencia de los
appropriate
descargues,
trucks,
los centros
updated
activos de
technologies,
separación
the
y
collection
hasta los
centers,
estándares de
etc., all
calidad
need
de
to be
materiales
updated.
recuperados.
We
Entonces
also need
tenemos
to
también
make
unos
sure that we properly
desafíos
enforce standards
tecnológicos
for
integrales.
recovered or recoverable
Además,
materials.
y yo lo puse también como un desafío tecnológico, los
Another
sistemas de
technological challenge that we
información
have
sobre
is
los
related to
residuos. Muchas
information
veces solo
systems.
tenemos información sobre volumen
Oftentimes,
generado, pero
we
¿de
only
dónde viene?
have
Por ejemplo, en
information
Paulaco
about the
estamos
volumes
haciendo
of
la
waste that are
comunicación
generated, but we
integrada
don't know where that
nacional de
waste has
gestión
come
integral de
from.
residuos sólidos.
And
Y
so we
estamos
need to have
haciendo parte de
integrated
la
waste
meta
management. We are
europea de
working on this
sostenibilidad porque
so
vemos
that we can have
una
a
gran
greater meta
parte de
vision
los
of
materiales de envases y
the
empaques y productos
economy.
que
One of
terminen
the main
siendo residuos
materials
son
that ends up
importados
in waste
y solo una
are
pequeña
imported
fracción
materials,
producidos en el país
and
mismo.
only
Entonces,
a small proportion
verlo
of
y el
these materials that
destino
end up in
seguir
waste
los
are
residuos
produced here in
también
Colombia.
es un desafío tecnológico en la
And so this is
mayoría
another
de los
technological
sistemas.
challenge that we
Y
face in the
claramente al lado
majority
de
of our
los
cities.
desafíos biofísicos tecnológicos
And so
tenemos
in addition to
los
biophysical and
desafíos
technological
sociales de cultura, de
challenges, we also have
legitimidad. Los
social
residuos tienen
challenges,
una
cultural
sensibilidad
challenges,
política
challenges of
muy alta porque
legitimacy
son muy
when it comes
visibles
to
y
policy,
afecta
because these are
la
very
vida
visible
diaria y la
policies,
calidad de
and
vida de
waste
forma
policy has a
directa.
direct impact on people's
Además,
quality of
los
life in their
desafíos están en
day-to-day dealings.
sensibilización de la cultura
We
y
have
cómo
to raise
percibimos los residuos
awareness
y
and teach
entender
people more
su
about
valor
waste
que puede
management.
ser
And we need to teach people about
aprovechado.
the
Y creo
value
que muy
that we
pronto
can
en el
also
Global
get from
South
waste. In the
tendremos un
global
tema
south,
también de
we
los
also have an
recolectores
issue
informales
of
y su
informal trash
participación en el
collectors
sistema de
and their
gestión integral de residuos
participation
sólidos,
in
que
the
también es un
integrated solid
desafío
waste
social
collection system.
de la gestión integral de residuos,
And
cómo
this, or their inclusion,
tecnificar
represents
el
a
oficio,
social
cómo
challenge.
formalizar
We
la
need to look at how
asociación
to
y la asociación de los
formalize their
recolectores
work and
y
how
la
to build
prestación
a
del
stronger
servicio
association
público
of
de
trash
este
collectors,
y
and
reconocer
look
la
at
prestación del
how they
servicio
are
como
actually offering us a public service and
trabajadores.
appropriately
Reconocer.
value that service.
Y ahí voy a la cuarta como dimensión de los
Let me now move
desafíos,
to the
que
fourth
son los
dimension of challenges,
administrativos.
which are
¿Cómo ser
administrative
eficiente y
challenges.
transparente en la
How can we
prestación
be efficient and transparent
del servicio público?
in the
La
provision of this public
urgencia de
service?
corto plazo frente a la innovación
We
estructural
have a short-term
en
need
la
for
infraestructura. ¿Cómo
structural innovation.
estructurar
We
los
need to work on our
contratos equitando
infrastructure.
la
How can
inversión,
we
la cobertura
ensure
y la
that we have
eficiencia en la
equitable and
inversión?
fair
¿Y cómo
contracts?
generar
How can we
materiales
find the right
secundarios a
investments?
partir de
And how can we
incentivos y
also
instrumentos? Entonces,
look
yo
at the
creo que
creation of secondary
los
materials? Management
dimensiones
has
que parte
several
de los desafíos
dimensions
biofísicos
that again are
sobre
related
los
to
volúmenes, la contribución del
biophysical
cambio
challenges,
climático y el riesgo,
the volumes of
desafíos
waste, the contribution
tecnológicos
of
de la
waste to climate
tecnología
change,
adecuada,
technological changes when it
desafíos
comes to having
sociales en
adequate
cultura y
technology,
legitimidad y
socio-cultural
inclusión
and
y
legitimacy
los
challenges,
administrativos de
and
urgencia de corto
also
plazo, innovación
urgent short-term
estructural
administrative
y la
challenges,
estructuración de contratos
and
adecuados.
also the creation of appropriate and
Muchas
adequate
gracias, Bart. Muy
contracts.
interesante.
Thank
Y
you
bueno,
very
hay
much,
mucha
Bart.
coincidencia
This
en lo
was
que
very
dice con
interesting.
los lineamientos
What you have
tiene,
said
que le mostré que tiene el banco para afrontar este
aligns
problema.
a great deal with what we
Volvemos
hear
aquí
in the bank say
para una
when it
segunda y
comes to
última
waste
pregunta
management.
en unos segundos.
I'll
Ahora
come back to you with another
quiero dar un
question in a
poco
moment, but now we would love to hear from Eva
Caribe Circular de
Ringoff,
la cooperación alemana
who's
GIZ,
the head
entrando
of
en la iniciativa
Caribe
SICA,
Circular, working in cooperation with
regulamiento de residuos plásticos
GIZ, looking at
y promoción de la
management
economía
of
circular. Es muy
plastics
interesante
and the circular
y un
economy.
área de mucho interés para nosotros.
And this is an
Eva,
area of
una
great interest
pregunta en
for
esta
us.
misma línea. ¿En qué
Eva,
áreas
I
de
have
economía
a
circular
related
deberían
question for you.
enfocarse las ciudades
Where
para
in the
lograr una
circular
gestión
economy
de
should
residuos más
cities
efectiva?
focus to
¿Y con
ensure
qué
more
forma deberíamos
effective
seguir
solid waste management? That is to
lidiando como lo
say,
hemos hecho siempre o proponer
should
otras
we
alternativas?
continue to
No es
collect
una
waste
pregunta fácil,
as we
pero
always have, or
vamos
should we
haciendo.
change
Gracias.
things up? It's not an easy question, but we'd love to hear
Sí,
from you.
Bart ha hablado mucho sobre la recolección, que es un
Bart's
aspecto
talked a
muy
lot
importante,
about waste
pero me
collection,
gustaría
which is a very
enfocar un poco
important
más a
aspect of the
la
issue, but
prevención de
I
los
would like to talk
residuos,
more about
especialmente para
prevention of
reducir los
waste creation
gastos de
to
recolección,
reduce
porque las ciudades no
collection
deberían
costs.
enfocarse
because cities should not be focusing on finding new land or operating dumps, but rather cities should be focusing on the circular economy. There are different categories in the circular economy that can be taken advantage of for business design. We have production, the design of biomaterials, for example, bioplastics. So this is for institutions and others. We have circular use, which are reuse cycles to extend the life cycle of materials and products. We have value recovery to ensure the quality of recycled materials. To reduce pollution, we also have partnerships and promotion.
De cuarta categoría tenemos el apoyo circular.
We then have circular support. That could be, let's say, awareness-raising campaigns, tools, etc.
Enfocar mucho más a sistemas retornables.
We could focus a lot more on circular systems. We have Cancun, Santo Domingo, Bogota, and at GIZ in German Cooperation Organization, we have been doing a pilot project looking at the reuse of food and drink containers. For example, in companies, cafeterias, restaurants, etc.
Otro ejemplo puede ser la promoción de la
We could also look at promoting value recovery. We see that people oftentimes don't know how to separate their waste appropriately. So we need to look at how we can better educate people. And for example, we could look at the development of an application. We have done a pilot program with eCoins, which is for children and schools to help teach them about waste management. Because children, in this sense, can multiply knowledge. But also made reference to something very important, which is that it's not only about waste generation or creation, but also how to properly assess and look at the flow of materials. Then we have circular support, and there's a waste flow diagram that we have applied with many municipalities, looking at not only the flow of waste, but also the volume of waste in a municipal waste system. And this also enables us to see, for example, different sources of pollution, for example, microplastic leakage into the environment. Our cities really need a baseline that they can use to monitor all kinds of impacts in our societies. And in a circular economy, when it comes to the waste hierarchy, we of course have prevention up the top of the pyramid, but then we have collection and recycling. It's very important that cities focus on these issues to look at how to reduce waste. Thank you very much. Bart, I'm not sure if Bart had to leave us or if he's here for one more question.
Sí, perfecto, Bart. Bueno,
okay, Bart, I see that you are still here, but you are on mute.
Okay, gracias.
Sí, perfecto. Muy rápido. Bueno, Bart tiene que salir un poco antes. Le agradecemos
Bart
de
has
antemano
to
la presentación.
leave us a little earlier. We'd like to thank you, Bart, for being here as long as you have been. Just one more question. It's both easy and difficult at the same time. Based on what you've seen in Latin America, the Caribbean, and the rest of the world, what quick recommendations could you give us in the region when it comes to overcoming the issue of solid waste? What's the formula? What would you say to a city that wants to improve its solid waste management? So some general recommendations that could be broadly applied.
Muchas gracias, Alfredo. Yo creo que
Thank you
no
very
hay
much,
una
Alfredo.
receta, no hay
I
una
don't think there's a
receta
formula, there's no
exacto
recipe,
porque también tenemos mucha diversidad. Hay
because we
mucha
also have a great
diversidad
deal
en
of
ciudades
diversity
grandes,
within our
ciudades
cities. We have
pequeñas, en
large
países
cities, we have
grandes y
small
países
cities,
pequeños.
we have
Además,
larger
también
versus
tocar el
smaller
mercado
countries.
es muy importante para
We have
esos
different kinds of
materiales
markets.
secundarios.
We
Entonces
have
tenemos
markets where
grandes
secondary
diferencias. Yo
materials are
creo que
more important than in other
especialmente
places. So these are
en
huge
ciudades más
challenges.
pequeños hay grandes desafíos de
And when it comes to
infraestructura.
smaller cities, we
Entonces yo
also
no
have
creo que
many
hay
specific
una
challenges
receta
related
como
to
tal. Sí creo que
infrastructure.
estamos
So I don't think there
en
is
un
one specific
momento de
formula.
bisagra, yo diría.
I do think
Queremos
that
decir
we are at a
esto
turning point
nuevamente,
or a
la
hinge moment, as I would
tradición
call
del
it. What do I
sector
mean
de
by
gestión
this?
de residuos de los últimos
Traditionally,
30
in the
años
solid
sí
waste
está
sector over the
cambiando
30
para
years,
convertir prácticas tradicionales
we have
en
been
modelos
looking at how
verdaderamente de gestión
to
integral. ¿Y qué
change the
quiero
way that
decir
things
eso? Es que
work, looking at how
escalar los
to
modelos hace mayor
scale up our models
cobertura
to have greater coverage
y desarrollar modelos
and to
adecuados para
develop
pequeños
adequate
municipios
models
sobre, por
for
ejemplo,
smaller municipalities
aprovechamiento
when it
de
comes
compostaje
to,
en las ciudades. Yo
for
creo que ahí
example,
hay
use of
iniciativas,
compost
ejemplos en la región
in smaller municipalities. We have great
con grandes realidades,
recommendations
como
and
mercados de segunda
examples
y
from the region.
emprendimientos de
We
economía
also
circular en
have
el sector que no
startups
hemos visto
in the
en
circular
los
economy
últimos
in the
30 años
sector.
que
It's
sí
something we
ahora
hadn't
sí
seen
empiecen a
in
estar
the previous 30
desarrollando.
years.
Pero esto
So
toma
we
tiempo,
are
entonces
starting to see
esto
these kinds of
es una
developments.
transición,
Nonetheless,
una
they take
bisagra que
time.
tome,
This
yo
is
diría casi
a transition
generaciones, porque nos
that's, as
vemos,
I
por
said
ejemplo,
before, a
ya vemos,
hinge
por ejemplo, en
moment. I
Colombia
think
los
this could
efectos de
take
la
us a full
disponibilidad
generation.
extendida del producto para ciertos flujos que han
I do
generado
see that the extended
cambios
product
importantes
responsibility
que han
concept in
despertado nuevos
Colombia has really
negocios y
awoken
donde la gestión
ideas
de
for new
residuos y el
ideas and is
aprovechamiento de
having an
residuos
impact.
va a
We have to
generar
look at how to
nuevos
use
negocios.
waste,
También
and
vemos
I'm sure this will
muchas
lead to new
iniciativas
businesses.
en la
We
región
also
sobre
see a lot of
modelos de economía
initiatives
circular, por ejemplo, a
with circular
partir
economy models.
de prevención. Por ejemplo, hay una
When it
empresa
comes to
chilena muy
prevention, for
relevante,
example, there is
muy
a very
interesante,
large
a
Chilean
granel,
company
que presenta productos
which
a granel en
sells
vez de empaques
products in
pequeñas.
bulk
Entonces, evite muchos residuos.
and then
También yo
packs it
creo
into
que
small packages for the
a
end
este se
client,
refiere mucho el
avoiding
cambio
packaging
cultural en los
waste. So it's
administradores
also a lot
públicos.
about cultural changes, especially in our
La
public
gestión integral de
administrations,
residuos requiere
because
todos estos
integrated waste management
capacidades
requires
técnico-administrativas
that
y de
we have all
gestión
of the necessary technical,
para
administrative, and
justamente
management capacities
impulsar la innovación
to
de
really
los
boost
sistemas. Y
innovation
creo que,
in our
y
systems.
este es el último tema que quisiera
This is the last
vincular
point
a
that
la
I will
cadena
touch
de
upon.
construcción.
We
Es
should
muy
also
importante la
connect
gestión de
with the
residuos, porque
construction
este
sector
está,
supply
en
chain.
muchos de nuestras casas está incrustado la tecnología para que podamos hacer economía circular
Because
en casa. Entonces creo
we
que
do have
ese
the
es un aspecto que
necessary
no ha
characteristics of
estado muy
functionalities in
presente en
our
la
homes
gestión de
to
residuos,
actually
pero la
engage directly in
construcción y la
circular
forma y
economy.
la arquitectura, cómo
The
están
idea is to
diseñados
work more
nuestras
closely
casas,
with the
edificios
construction
y
sector and
conjuntos y
architects
infraestructura
rather,
relacionados
so that we
definitivo
can
para que
facilitate
realmente ese
inclusion in the
cambio
circular
cultural se
economy
dé.
from our homes. And this is a part of our cultural change, as I mentioned
Excelente,
before.
bueno, muchas gracias. Y bueno, nos
Thank you,
despedimos de
Bart.
ti.
Thank you so
Agradecemos mucho
much.
la
And
compañía
thank you again
hoy
for being
día.
here. And we'll now say
Nuevamente,
goodbye to
gracias.
you.
Eva,
Eva,
otra pregunta fácil, ¿no? Para
another
terminar.
easy question to close
Un
with,
poco vinculado a lo que hemos hablado respecto
which is connected to what we've already spoken
a la
about
parte de gobernanza,
when it
a la
comes to
parte
governance,
institucional. ¿Cómo,
to the
cuál crees tú que debe
institutional
ser el rol de los
aspect.
gobiernos locales en la
What do you
prevención
think
de
the role of
residuos y
local
cómo
governments is
incentivar que estos
in
cambios en la
waste
prevención de la
prevention?
minimización sean sostenibles a largo plazo?
And how can we ensure that this change is
Los gobiernos
sustainable
locales
in the long
desempeñan un
time?
papel crucial
Local
en la
governments play
prevención
a
de los
fundamental and
residuos
crucial
a
role
través de
in waste
diversas
management.
iniciativas, políticas
They implement
normativas,
different
¿no? Que
initiatives,
muchas veces piensan
regulations,
que
and
son los
projects.
gobiernos nacionales que
We
realmente
often
tienen que
think
manejarlo, pero es
that
muy
it is national
importante
governments that should be
porque
in
las
charge of this,
ciudades toman un
but
liderazgo y en particular para
cities must
reducir la
also take
cantidad
on
de
leadership
residuos. Así el
when it
costo
comes
de
to,
gestión de
for
residuos
example,
es
the
muy
waste
importante
management, the
que
cost of
las
waste
ciudades tomen
management, the
acciones
volume of waste.
continuamente.
So we
Puede
see
ser,
here
por
cities are
ejemplo,
taking continuous
incentivar
actions
el
in this regard.
establecimiento y la
For
operación de
example, the
negocios
establishment and
para
operation of businesses for
materiales sostenibles, dar
biomaterials,
alternativas.
sustainable
Puede ser
materials. It's
también
up to cities to
aprobar
offer
una
alternatives.
ordenanza municipal
We
para
can also have a
prohibir
municipal
plástico de
ordinance
un
to
solo uso
prohibit
y envases
single-use plastic
descartables.
or disposable cups. It is important that cities get involved because it is easier to give or play a positive role and be a good role model for national governments in this way. We can also look at people doing compost in their own homes. Bart mentioned that. We can also offer trainings in municipalities, in many European cities, even in Latin American cities. We have also looked at how to promote, for example, returnable systems that I mentioned, for example, by offering grants. We also need to look at the implementation of policies and regulations. Here it is necessary that local governments provide necessary legal frameworks and policies for sustainable management of natural resources. We need to also focus on sustainable procurement practices in municipalities, and we also need to look at a transition to the circular economy. Green businesses can create many jobs, and local governments can help, for example, with offering reduced tax rates or tax breaks for these kinds of projects. We also need to look at public-private collaboration. We must seek greater interaction and projects with the private sector and with civil society. Municipalities do not have to take on all of the costs involved in these kinds of initiatives. Private sector is where we really see leaders in investment in Latin America, and that's the case for innovation around the world. Education and awareness raising. These are very, very important. Local governments can offer communication strategies, municipal festivities or celebrations, training programs. For example, we could have environmental film screenings in connection with the circular economy. That's something that we've looked at doing in Honduras. And finally, I must talk about the importance of leadership. A mayor is a role model to be followed. The mayors that I have met who have been very decisive and taken concrete actions in waste management have also attained great popularity because they have been able to positively transform their cities. The combination of different strategies is another very important aspect that we should focus on. We need to look at a kind of formula that could be applied and then decide what is actually viable. And then, of course, we must look at the kinds of resources that can be offered, grants or other kinds of investment that might come from the private sector.
Muchas gracias. Bueno, es una respuesta muy completa y definitiva.
Thank you, Eva. Eva, that was a really complete, multivariant response. And it's been speaking about the renovation. This is a fascinating topic indeed. There's plenty still to do and to share. Thank you, Eva, for your participation and your response. I think we have a few more minutes for and we will come back to you in the Q&A session. Thank you very much. We finished the first part of this webinar, which was the discussion, and now we move on to the second, which covers two case presentations in Latin American cities. In this case, Santiago, Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil, and Mexico City, which are going to tell us about their experience in innovative solutions for solid waste management. First, we're going to see the experience of the municipality of Santiago, Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil, where there is a large number of organic waste in their production of waste. They have implemented green currency, which aims to separate organic waste in urban settings. Now we have the presentation or the participation of Mayor Thiago Gorski Lacerda, the mayor of Santiago in Rio Grande do Sul, who's going to make a presentation. So they are telling me we're having a few internet connectivity issues, so we hope we won't have any issues. Tiago, you have the floor. Thank you for joining us.
Bom dia a todos, muito obrigado pela oportunidade. Vou falar pela minha língua nativa, que é o português. Aqui em Santiago, no Rio Grande do Sul, na região sul
Here
do
in
Brasil,
the south of
aí com a
Santiago, Brazil,
Argentina e também com o Uruguai, nós
we have the frontier
desenvolvemos
with
uma
Uruguay
moeda
and
social.
Argentina. We
Todas
have
elas
a
a partir
social
dos
challenge.
resíduos, tanto do resíduo orgânico quanto do resíduo
All of this
reciclado.
based on waste,
Nós temos
both inorganic
aí
waste, both as
Pila
recycled
Verde.
waste.
O Pila Verde é esta
Here
moeda aqui
we have
que nós
this,
criamos da seguinte
the
forma.
Pila
Os
Verde,
resíduos
which is a
orgânicos,
green
eles são
currency
os
that we
grandes vilões
created,
dos resíduos sólidos.
and
Ele tem
organic
como
waste
peso o chorume e também o mau cheiro.
are the
E
great
então
basis of solid waste.
nós criamos uma metodologia
They
de economia
weigh a
circular
lot,
e
they
inovação
smell. We created a
pautada
circular
pelo
economy
resíduo orgânico.
methodology
O
for
cidadão
bio-innovation
acumula o lixo doméstico
addressed to
domiciliar. O
cover
lixo da
organic
pia
waste.
da cozinha
Citizens
vai nos nossos pontos de
accumulate
coleta.
their
A cada
waste
5
that they take
quilos
from
de resíduo
their
orgânico,
kitchens.
troca por
They go to the
pila
recollection
verde.
centers, and
A
for
prefeitura
every
recebe
5
este lixo
kilos of
orgânico,
waste, they
encaminhamos para uma
exchange it for a pila
composteira
verde,
e com
for a green currency.
aceleração biológica entre
And the
40 a
company
45
charged
dias,
with
esse
this
lixo orgânico ele é transformado
gets
em
the
adubo
solid
orgânico
waste,
com
the organic
alto
waste
teor de fertilidade para as
from 40,
culturas.
and within 40 and
O,
45
o
days,
cidadão,
this
depois
waste
deste
becomes
pila verde, ele vai nas nossas feiras da agricultura
materials
familiar,
for
inclusive feiras de
agriculture.
orgânicos, e compra
The,
lá tudo que os
the
nossos
citizen, the
produtores
citizens who
têm à
get the pila
disposição
verde,
para
they
comercializar.
they get
Ou seja,
uh,
a nossa feira
they,
é
they
de
get the pila verde
produtor,
and they go
não
to
é de
a special
atravessador, ou seja,
market
é uma
where they
pessoa que
get
vai numa outra
where they
cidade,
can
num
pay
outro
for produce
território
for with pila
e
verdes. It's not about
compra para
resellers, it's
revender.
actual
Então, está aí
producers
uma
who
cadeia
receive this kind of
agroalimentar, uma
currency.
política de desenvolvimento local e
This
territorial.
is
Há uma
an
paridade
agro-food
patrimonial do
chain
pila com
that
o real,
helps to
ou seja,
territorial and
tudo que
local
temos à
development.
disposição, os
There is a
agricultores
parity of
vendem
an exchange
como
with pila
pila
with
verde.
waste.
O agricultor
So
recebeu este
agricultures
pila. O
sell
cidadão colocou na
sell their
sua
produce
mesa
as pila verde,
and the
and
frescão de
citizens
qualidade
get
com dinheiro que não
uh,
existia.
a
Esse
quality
dinheiro
fresh
ia para o
food
lixo.
with that money with
Agora,
money that didn't
através do
exist.
lixo orgânico, nós
And now we
proporcionamos
have
uma
managed to
nova
move
moeda.
through
O
our
agricultor,
organic
com
waste
posse deste
to create a
pila,
new
vem
currency and
até
a
a
new
prefeitura
economy.
municipal, compra todos os
By
insumos
exchanging the pila,
imprescindíveis para a produção.
the
Adubos,
citizens can go
sementes,
to the mayor's office
peixes,
and get
horas
all
de
of the
máquina e assim por diante para
they
a
get
sua produção. E a prefeitura
everything they
recebe
need, even from the food
exclusivamente em
as to machine
pila
hours to
verde.
operate and seats
Para
and so
cada
on.
pila verde
So we
emitido, o
receive
cidadão trocou
this
5
exclusively
quilos de
in
resíduo
pila verde.
orgânico. A
For each
prefeitura
green
ganha
currency
através de
unit,
custo evitado.
the
A cada
citizen
pila
needs to
verde
provide
emitido, a
5 kilos
prefeitura
of organic
economiza
waste,
R$ 3,60.
and per each
O
pila
cidadão,
verde
por
issued
sua
by the
vez,
mayor's
colocou
office,
alimento no seu prato com
the
lixo que
citizen
não
will get
existia. O
will
agricultor,
have provided
então,
will
ele
have received
teve mais
food
clientes.
into their
Então, aí,
plate
o tripé
after
da
producing waste.
sustentabilidade, o econômico, o
That is
social e o ambiental.
the tripod of
Também fizemos
sustainability,
algumas
environment
constatações e
by
necessidades.
waste
Lá na
and
composteira, nós
economy.
buscamos mão de obra
In our
prisional. Os
cities,
presos, os apenados,
in the,
trabalham
at
no
the waste
processo da
management center,
composteira.
we
Nos
look
pontos
for
de troca do
local
Pila Verde
man,
e também na conscientização
manpower.
nas escolas,
They
nós criamos uma
they
bolsa
work
de
in the
estudos,
production
tá?
in the
Que
production
é
centers,
o chamado Jovem Aprendiz
and we
Ambiental,
created
onde
a
o aluno do
scholarship
ensino médio, no seu
named.
turno inverso, trabalha nos pontos de coleta, nos pontos de troca, auxiliando, então, em
We created
todo
a
o
scholarship for our
processo. E, com
workers
isso, ele recebe uma
to help
bolsa de estudos.
to help the entire
Fizemos uma
process.
pesquisa com os funcionários públicos da
And
prefeitura.
so they get
Apenas
a student
20%
scholarship,
tinham o
and
hábito de comprar
ultimately also
nas
helps
nossas feiras.
the waste
Criamos,
management
então,
process and
benefício chamado
sustainability.
Vale Feira, onde é um saldo de R$ 75 por mês, só passa
We
na
created the Vale Feria,
vinculado ao código,
where
ao
you get
CPF, ao
75
registro do
reales
veículo.
a month
Então, temos aí
that is
bioinovação,
linked to
cadeias
the code of your
agroalimentares,
registration number.
reduzindo
And, for example,
o
in
custo por lixo,
agri-food
dando esse
networks,
destino
it's very useful
adequado
because it
e
reduces the
criando
cost
uma
of
moeda
waste by
virtual. Estamos
properly routing it and created a virtual currency. We are also in the process of transferring all companies, and we are providing companies with a Pila card, which is within the same system. We are finishing. We are actually not printing bills because the bill has an animal of our fauna and then an environmentalist. They provide classes for science and nature for our children and showing the history of the municipality as well as activities for the proper management and administration of the region. We have presence in many communities and thousands of people who are covered directly, reducing greatly the cost of waste and trash. We don't just have landfills, and the landfill that receives the residue or waste, it's 150 kilometers away from the city of Santa Maria, which means it's a successful initiative with the participation of the community. We created this with all of this with organic waste. Through recycling, we created the pila azul or the blue pila. The blue pila is for the recycling of plastic bottles and cartons. So here we have a water bottle, and that will be covered in this one, and if citizens accumulate the recycling, they go to the collection or the collection centers where we receive those recyclable products. And what do we do with that? The mayor's office donate them directly to recyclers. So we invest in the recyclers cycle, so to speak, and to encourage citizens to accumulate the waste and to provide them separately to the mayor's office. And with that, the mayor's office will then give to the recycling cooperatives. So we give the bill to the recyclers and the citizen gets the card. So what do citizens do? This is a cultural policy. So the citizens can get parking tickets or parking rates and cover them with this for the public network. So it is within an urban mobility strategy, and it also helps citizens pay the fare of bus tickets and public transportation services with the blue pila. And this is all based on organic waste. So with the green one, you can buy food and you can have and culture, and with the blue one, you get mobility bonuses. And these are the two benefits that we have created in our municipality, searching for alternatives that make a difference in moving the common economy and circular economy. Thank you, Santiago, for your presentation. So you told us about the blue and green pila, both in the same presentation, and it's very, very interesting. It's a solidarity economy and education and cost avoidance, reducing waste that goes to landfills, which is great. It seems like a very interesting process. So please stay for the Q&A after the following presentation. Please stay. Thank you, Mayor. And to close with this presentation section, we have the case of Mexico City for the waste management in Mexico City by Estefania Arriaga, by the Secretary of Environmental Management, and with this a strategy about circular economy, proper management of solid waste, and they're going to tell us about their experience. In particular, the plan for the selection, Azcapotzalco, sure we said that correctly. And then we have Estefania Arriaga, who is in the unit of solid waste management of Mexico City, to tell us all about this. You have the floor, Estefania. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation and the floor. I'm going to be sharing my screen now.
Ahí se ve. Perfecto.
There we go. So I'm going to be talking about waste management in Mexico City within a framework of circular economy, and particularly in the transfer and the collection plan as Capotzalco. First, a little bit of context about Mexico City. It comprises 16 mayor's offices, it is over 9 million inhabitants with 2.28 million of people in floating population, which is a population that goes to the city either for commerce or for work. We estimate that the city generates 12.4 tons, 12.4 thousand tons of waste a day, excuse me, or 1.07 kilograms per inhabitant. This is a great urban area, but 60% of the soil is conservation soil or green area. So that's why we are orienting our policies to conservation. In this sense, one of the tools for public management is the comprehensive waste management program, which has been implemented since 2010, excuse me, where we started promoting separation of waste due to the closure of the last landfill that we had in the city. And based on that, we have aimed to strengthen the separation of waste and to implementing better technology for waste management. The last updates, it is more based on international tools such as the ODS of the UN and other instruments that we have, the Basura Cero Action Plan, this biodiversity strategy of the city. Within this program, we can highlight that it has four components, which are production and responsible production and consumption, management and use of waste, climate change, adaptation and innovation, and work support, which we know this is a very broad topic and it needs to have very different access that can help the, waste management. Some of the results that we have seen, well, we have an operational technical committee to gather all the mayor's offices where we look, or where our aim is to create joint solutions to manage waste and the issues that it provides. We have also taken more than 100 tons of solid waste in landfills. We have prohibition for the commercialized, distribute, and use single-use plastics, which has allowed us to reduce the amount of waste created. We also, our previous presenters spoke about the environmental culture and education. We are also talking about, we have also trained people to be capacitated, to be trainers to citizenship, to provide solutions for management. We also created establishments to inform businesses about preservation of single-use plastics, so that they could find solutions on how to better trade their products. And then, based on that prohibition, we had surveillance visits to all establishments to see that they were complying with that prohibition and to see which weren't. Within the environmental and climate change program, which was presented during this administration, we calculate that we contributed with an annual mitigation through these actions of 621,239 tons of CO2 emissions. And through this program, we had two important programs, which is the exchange market and Reciclatron, which looks for opportunities for the citizens to provide their waste and manage them properly. With more than 90,000 participants, we have received over 700 tons of waste for recycling, and we mitigated over 905 tons. The Basura Cero or zero trash program aims to implement other diverse strategies to manage the large amount of waste sent to final disposition. We had different goals for each year. We have different goals for recycling, composting, alternative fuels, new technology, research, and landfills. In this, so we see the subject of construction waste is a very big problem in the city is also covered, and we saw that there was a great generation of it, so that's why it's there at the bottom. This here, largely, this is the management of waste in the city once they are provided to the collection personnel. Once they are collected by the trucks, they are taken to the transference stations in the city, and depending on the types of residue or waste, the organic waste can be sent to, and the non-organic to compacting. As I already mentioned, we don't have a final disposition sites, so these waste is sent to final disposition areas in other states nearby with an associated cost. The other technologies we have a biodiesel plant, a hydrothermal plant, we have machinery for the management of solid waste, and we are also sending several types of waste waste reception sites. So here we have an images of the selection plant in Vallejo. Here the yellow is the transfer unit, and the red is the selection plant area. There, waste arrives and they are separated by technology, by magnets, or by reading of this type of residue or waste that are separated into different fractions and allows us to recover the recyclable portion of the waste. Thanks to this plant in Vallejo, we have recovered over 12,000 tons of waste a year, recyclable waste, and that provides saving both in transport and final disposition of over 26 million Mexican pesos. Thanks to the success of this plant, we built a new plant in San Juan de Aragon, in another area of the city, as you see below, and there it has the same functioning. We have a pre-selection of waste. We have a mechanical pre-selection, and then we have a manual triage so that we can gather the biggest number of the largest number. This plant in the east of the city, it has provided 67.7 Mexican pesos savings a year. What is being sent to final disposition.
This whole circular economy focus, as has been discussed, is on the rise around the world and is being implemented in multiple countries in accordance with each local context. It is not possible to say that we can have the same implementations in Europe that we can have here in Mexico, because we have different contexts, different cultures, different management styles, different levels of investment, etc. Accordingly, we came up with a vision of the circular economy for Mexico, and what we have sought to do is to reduce the extraction and recovery of natural sources. That is to say, it is a regenerative vision focused on people. We are also trying to extend the useful life of our countries, to multiply new business models, to have product service systems. So what we are doing is we are putting economy at the service of people, and we are seeking to reduce emissions and also to promote the creation of green jobs with support for technological innovation. And also, to complement existing structures in the country. We are also seeking a safe and socially just transition. Accordingly, last year, we published the Circular Economy Law of the City of Mexico, which has an integrated or comprehensive vision. What we are seeking to do to look at the issue of waste by including it in the circular economy law. While waste management is related to circular economy because we are looking at redesign and recovery of products, we are looking at the reduction of waste production, the increase of green jobs, and so on and so forth, as previously mentioned. The circular economy law was worked on by 8 central secretariats here in the Congress of the City of Mexico. And we've also worked hand in hand with the Ministry of Tourism. We're looking at how to make the system integral and also how to make it hierarchical. So we are first prioritizing responsible use, reuse, repair, and finally recycling or energy re-extraction. And we also have temporary design and looking at more cyclical design, so looking at products that can be redesigned and reused, etc. So what we established here in the regulation for circular economy, well, what we have here is the regulation of the aforementioned law. Then we have our circular economy program, which establishes very specific actions to be executed by different government secretariats in order to move forward with this new model. We have a circularity assessment tool, which will enable companies to look where they are positioned and how they can advance as they move forward with the circular economy. And this is also associated with different economic incentives if these companies fulfill certain circularity criteria. Finally, we have the element of culture, and therefore we have our circular economy information system. This system is to educate people, the general public, about what the circular economy is, as well as to work with companies. And we are also looking at how our city is positioned and what we are doing in order to advance in this area. That's all that I had to present for now. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Estefania, for this excellent presentation. A fascinating case in Mexico City. From the bank's perspective, we always ask our colleagues or institutions in other countries, is there an example in Latin America that can be followed everywhere? Because we see that it can be more successful in some areas than others, or that you have to design specific projects for each area. We see that in the case of Mexico City, it is a project that could be visited, so to speak, because it is closer by. It's great to hear what's working in Latin America and, of course, the adaptations that are necessary. And so it's fascinating to hear about Mexico City. Thank you, Estefania. We have now come to the end of the second part of our webinar, which were our presentations. So thank you once again to our mayor as well as Estefania. And we will now move forward with the final segment. We have some 18 to 20 minutes left now for questions. So I will invite Eva and Santiago to join us again on screen. Santiago, rather, to join us on screen for questions.
De las preguntas que han aparecido en el chat. Algunas se han tratado de responder y seguimos respondiendo.
So there are several questions here in the chat, some of them being answered in the chat, others will be answered here during the segment. I have a question, actually.
Preguntas sobre impactos o situaciones de corto plazo.
My question is about impact or the short term. When it comes to solid waste, looking at circular economy and strategy, there is, of course, a planning element and another element which was not previously addressed, which is the mid and long term, looking to the future. Sometimes when we look to the future, we forget what's happening in the present.
De cierre botaderos, de basurales, de situaciones directas en el día de hoy.
So when it comes to an impact on, for example, dump operations, what are you doing at the bank? Obviously, we have dumps which sometimes create environmental or sanitation issues. And so in the bank, we have established certain priorities and reasonable solutions. But this must also go hand in hand with solutions, being as sustainable as possible. We shouldn't close one dump to open another one. We shouldn't close a dump if we don't have a new destination for that waste. And so we're trying to be as integrated and comprehensive as possible, of course, always taking into account the specificities of each case. So that was a question that was asked to me here in the Q&A module. Eva, I have a question here for you. It's a broader vision of what is being done here. We have a colleague who has asked, in Latin America, our economies are focused on other kinds of issues, for example, public health, policy, education, inflation, which might be considered equally important and fundamental. So how can we prioritize waste management given we have all these other issues on our agenda? It's a very, very good question. In my experience, when we look at waste management at the municipal or national levels, we see that things get complicated. I mean, it's hard to argue for waste management when people, for example, think it's more important to build a road. We have to invest in waste management. Waste management represents an enormous cost. Why is this the case? Because the focus has always been on final disposal and how to treat waste. But oftentimes, waste is largely created by the private sector. So in addition to the measures that we have mentioned at the municipal level, we must start to work on the national level. And as part of our project, we are also looking at a regional solution for the idea of extended responsibility from producers, because they should also be responsible for waste. And it shouldn't be municipalities that are in charge of managing or handling materials waste that is created by industry. So we need to look at who can manage waste. And in Latin America, a private sector waste management system could be thought of to kind of sell this concept and to focus also, or to zoom in on the idea of circular economy. It's important to recognize that circular economy creates jobs when it comes to reuse of materials and so on and so forth. And so for municipalities, the circular economy idea is more attractive than other alternatives because they can think about creating jobs in contrast to other sectors where there's perhaps more automated or mechanized employment options. And so the economic aspect is here what's most relevant. I completely agree. If I could just add my grain of salt, at the bank, of course, the political and decision-making aspect is very important. Sometimes the priorities that are, or what is given priority in the political sphere is not always what we would like to see. And we have seen many projects down on the list in priorities. And oftentimes waste management projects are very long-term. And we don't see great returns there initially. Because waste management projects will really bear fruits much farther down the line. And so it's very relevant for those of us who work in this sector when it comes to how we can actually think about convincing authorities to engage in these projects. Estefanía.
En el caso de, aquí nos pregunta respecto al tema de las tarifas, nos dice, en el caso de, bueno,
There's a
pasa
question here
colombiano, en
about
el caso
tariffs.
de un país, dice, las administraciones municipales no conocen en
It
detalle
says that
cuánto les cuesta
municipal
el servicio,
administrations
y esto
do
no permite
not
entonces
are not
entender
familiar with the
cuál
costs
debe ser la
associated
tarifa
with
o los
waste
volúmenes de
management.
gestión asociados
And
a esta
so
administración financiera.
there is inadequate
Eh,
calculation of
la pregunta
associated
entonces es un
costs.
poco, ¿cómo lo
So the
hacen ustedes con
question
el
is,
marco normativo? ¿Cómo trabajaron con el
how did
tema
you do this
de
in the
costos?
regulatory framework?
¿Tuvieron que
How
hacer
did
alguna
you address the
reforma?
issue of
¿Hay
costs? Did you
ahorro?
need to have
Primero
a
me imagino tuvieron que
reform?
entender bien cuánto estaban gastando, cuánto costaban las
Did
cosas
you
y
first have
si
to
hubo que
look
hacer algún
at
tipo de
how much was being
modificación
spent
o
and what
alguna
kind of
medida
savings you would have?
para
Did you
garantizar
have to
o
change
promover la
something or just
sostenibilidad
something
del
to
modelo que nos
promote
presentaron?
sustainability within the model that you presented?
Pues creo que tenemos un poquito de ventajas en ciertos puntos, porque
I think we
desde
have
el
certain
año
advantages
2006
here
contamos con
because
un
since
inventario de residuos
2006,
sólidos que
we
nos permite
had
conocer cuánto se está
maintained
generando todos los
a
días y
solid
cuánto se está
waste
entregando
management
todos los días.
inventory to see exactly
Con
how
eso en
much
general
solid waste
podemos
was
también
being
hacer una
generated
transferencia cuánto
each
se
day,
está
the
enviando a
transfer,
disposición final,
how
etcétera,
much
y
was
poder
going to
resolver
final
pues
disposal, and so on and so
estos
forth.
residuos que se envían a disposición final, pues a nosotros nos cuesta esta entrada de los residuos, pues es algo
And
que se
having
tiene
this
bien, bien
information about
detallado por
final
parte de la
disposal
Secretaría
is
General de
great.
Servicios.
And
Y
fortunately, our
además,
Secretariat of Public
pues
Services
la
has all
parte de
this
manejo de estos
information.
residuos está a
And
cargo
when it comes
tanto de
to
las
waste
secretarías como
management,
de
well,
la
this is
Secretaría.
under the
Entonces,
charge
no
of the
hay
Secretariat as
terceras
well
personas
as
que tengan
under
que,
the
o sea, sí,
charge
sí hay como
of
empresas subcontratadas, pero en realidad toda la coordinación
other
y
local
manejo lo hace el
authorities. And while
secretariado
there are
y es por eso que pues
subcontracted
hay mayor
vendors,
facilidad
the
de
Secretariat
coordinación y de que
has
se puedan
really the
establecer
overall
pues
vision
diversas estrategias para pues infraestructura,
of
para
these
pues tener
strategies.
bien monitoreado cuánto está ingresando, cuánto está saliendo y cuánto se está enviando a
And
disposición
here we
final.
can see exactly how much waste is going in, how much is coming out, and the
Excelente,
associated costs.
perfecto.
Excellent.
Parto con
Thank you.
Estefanía y después regreso a Eva.
Another one for Stephanie, and then we'll come back
Respecto a Tiago,
to
aparentemente tuvo un problema en la conexión. Estamos esperando a
Eva.
ver si regresa y si no, nos entretenemos con Eva y
And it
Estefanía
seems
con
that
mi
Iago
intervención de discusión.
is having some
Eva, una
connection
pregunta,
issues, so hopefully he'll join us.
perdonen
But
los del
in any
público
case,
que
we're having a great
puedo
discussion.
ser yo. Hablaste de combustible alternativo o combustible
Eva,
para
you talked
cementeras.
about,
¿Nos puedes elaborar un
or
poco más
Stephanie, rather, you
cómo
talked
está
about
trabajando ese modelo?
alternatives,
Digamos, ¿qué fracción y si ustedes pagan por o les pagan
the
por
different
o
fractions.
cómo
Do
funciona
you
la
pay? Do
relación
they pay?
con la
How
industria
does the
cementera?
relationship work with the cement industry that you made reference to in your
Ahí,
presentation?
bueno, ay, perdón, ¿si era para mí o
I
para...?
apologize. Was that for me or for Eva?
No,
It's
no,
for
no, no,
me.
no, nosotros no trabajamos con la
No, we
cementería.
don't work with the cement
Era para
sector.
Estefanía.
No, it's for
Sí,
Estefania. It's for
Perdóname.
Estefania. Apologies.
En realidad, por ejemplo, estas plantas de selección se construyeron en
The selection
coordinación con una
plants were
empresa
built
cementera mexicana que es
with a
Cemex
Mexican cement
y
company,
pues
Cemex,
se hace un convenio con ellos para ver
and we've come to an agreement with them in the
qué va a
convention
poner cada parte. Una parte la
to agree
puso
what
para
each
la
party
ingeniería de la empresa
will be
cementera
contributing.
y otra la cubrió el gobierno de la ciudad, que es la parte como del terreno,
And then
los
also
controladores, los
the
permisos,
city
etcétera.
government, the government of
Y al
Mexico City,
momento ya del
provided the land and some other
funcionamiento,
elements.
hay la
Once the
parte de
plant is up
residuos
and running,
reciclables corresponde
when
al
it
gobierno de la
comes
ciudad.
to
Nosotros
recyclable waste, well,
aprovechamos esos
the
residuos que
city is
podemos
in
usar
charge of that.
y la parte de combustibles
And
derivados
when
de
it
residuos
comes
le
to
corresponde
the
a la empresa
refuse-derived
cementera.
fuel or
No,
RDF, well,
no nos
that's
pagan
under the
por eso
charge
porque ellos
of
se
the
encargan del
cement company.
financiamiento de
They
la
don't
planta
pay us for
y
that
eso es
because
como
they are
parte de
responsible
los
for running the
beneficios
plant,
que tiene, ¿no?
and that's part
Entonces,
of the benefits
de
that
este
they
tipo de residuos,
access
la fracción que
by the
está
use of this kind of waste.
utilizándose es la de los inorgánicos no
And we are
aprovechables,
using
ya
non-recyclable
lo
inorganic
que
waste.
ya
That
no
is
se,
the
lo que
fraction
está
of solid waste
predeterminado de
that's
la
being
planta de
used.
selección, lo que ya no se pudo separar, es lo que
And
se
we are
envía
looking at
a
very
través de esas
contaminated
plantas
waste
hacia
that couldn't be
las
used in the
cementeras.
previous step in the process, and
Perfecto,
it's sent from
muchas
one
gracias.
plant to the cement plant.
Eva, ahora
Perfect.
sí,
Thank you so
perdone
much.
la
Now let's move
confusión.
over to Eva. I do apologize for the
Obviamente,
confusion.
lo que mencionaste anteriormente y el plan que están trabajando, entiendo que se focaliza en iniciativas de reducción, reciclaje,
Based on
reemplazo
what
de
you mentioned, I
materiales,
understand that you are
etcétera,
looking at waste
me
reduction,
imagino
reuse,
que deben hacer,
recycling,
me
etc.,
imagino en el caso de los plásticos.
and with
Aquí
a
hace
special
una
focus on
pregunta que es bien
plastic
interesante.
waste.
Yo
There's an
soy bien
interesting
comprensivo a
question
la
here.
medida, yo la veo desde un punto de vista de que las respuestas sí son necesarias, pero
I
¿qué
do
visión
think,
tienen ustedes respecto
or rather,
la
what vision do
existencia
you
de
have
rellenos sanitarios? Un poco en el
when
esquema
it comes
presente y en
to
lo que se proyecta hacia futuro. ¿Cómo
sanitation
ven esa
dumps?
componente del sistema?
How do you see this component when it comes to
Bueno,
landfill?
digamos, en mi proyecto en particular no
In
miramos
my
la
project in
disposición
particular,
final,
we
porque
do not
también,
look at final
digamos, trabajamos
disposal
un poco en la línea de la Unión Europea y el gobierno
because
alemán
we are working within the, or in accordance with the criteria of the German government and the European Union, we are looking at reducing the amount of waste. There's a lot of focus here on reduction.
En energías, en eso el proyecto no se dirige porque la idea es realmente
the idea is to not create waste. So this is a lesson learned that we have from Europe to reduce the baseline costs. So I don't know if Estefania or our colleague from Brazil might have a different answer when it comes to the management of landfill. We have another question here for Eva. Okay, one more question for each of you and then one closing question. We continue to receive questions via the chat. We'll try to respond to some of these in writing.
Eva, respecto al tema de separación en origen,
with regards to separation of waste types at the origin, what difficulties exist in Latin America for the implementation of separating waste at its origin? It's not always been successful when we have tried to implement these kinds of strategies in different cities. We've had multiple issues around that, so I'd love to hear about your vision for this and the experience that you've had when it comes to waste separation at its origin. Separation of the waste is important to reduce the contamination of waste. For example, contamination with liquids or paper, metal, plastic.
Primero es muy importante y creo que eso es lo más importante que los municipios
It's
pueden
very
hacer.
important that municipalities get involved here
Y mirar cómo pueden
to look at how
separar los,
they can ensure
los residuos
better
orgánicos,
separation.
porque en muchas de las ciudades son
In
aún
many
más
cities,
del 50%,
more than
o también en gobiernos locales que son más rurales.
there are some local governments in more rural areas where we have a very high percentage of mixed waste. The general figure is 50%. If this were done better, it would reduce waste collection costs, but it could also lead to reduction in final disposal. Many challenges that are seen in cities, for example, fires at garbage dumps, is due to gases catching fire. If we were to separate our waste better at origin, we would
promocionar realmente, no gastar, ¿no?
We would be able to reduce costs and these kinds of issues. There are many markets that could engage in better separation.
Con pocos esfuerzos, digo también.
You can also do a lot with very little investment, but it is complex. For example, when we have high temperatures or high rainfall, compost is another thing that can be promoted. Home composting efforts and initiatives, separation of paper, because oftentimes when papers are contaminated by, when paper is contaminated by liquid, then you cannot move forward with good recycling. We also need to look at separating different types of plastic. We really focus on plastic in our project.
Si podemos recolectarlo aún, ¿no? muy temprano, podemos tener
but
una
if
mejor
we
calidad.
could have better waste separation from an early stage, then we would do a much better job. For example, if plastic makes its way into the ocean, then the quality drops significantly due to its interaction with salt water.
Vamos a hacer limpieza o sacamos los residuos del mar. Es que eso
and
es
when
muy
we remove
difícil.
waste from the sea, it's truly a very difficult exercise. And the waste that is collected can be used for asphalt, for example, but within the principles of the circular economy, we should be looking at better deposit systems.
En muchos gobiernos en Europa también se decidieron.
And in many governments in Europe, decisions have already been made, and I know that in Latin America there are current debates around this issue.
Bueno, hay el requisito también mirar un poco por por la responsabilidad extendida del
But we also
productor
need to look
primero
at
para,
the concept of extended
para tener una
responsibility
base realmente
with
de
the
reglamento
producers
legal, que
themselves,
es muy,
so
muy
that we
importante.
also have the necessary legal instruments to engage with this. Thank
Estefanía, la
you.
última pregunta y después
Thank you,
vamos a
Eva.
pasar
Stefania, a last
con
question,
los
and then we
debates.
close between you both.
Muy breve, muy simple. Bueno, no simple, muy simple la pregunta, pero me imagino que con complejidad.
There's,
La implementación de
I think this is a somewhat complex question.
¿Tuvieron algún tipo de problema o
Did
alguna
you have
decisión
any
que tengan que
question
tomar con los recicladores de
about
base, los recicladores informales?
what steps to take with informal or base recyclers?
Bueno, es que hablé como de muchas estrategias, pero me voy a
I
enfocar un
spoke about
poquito más
many
en el tema de
strategies,
las plantas
but
de
I'm going to
selección.
focus on
En
selection plans
ese,
specifically.
lo que se habló con el tema de los,
What we discussed
bueno, de los
regarding
trabajadores, como ya mencioné, son
workers,
parte de la empresa de Cemex,
they're
que fueron
part of the
contratados. En realidad se busca
of the
contratar a todas
selection
las
companies
personas que
contracted.
trabajan
We
como
look for the
recicladores
people who are
informales, que
already
les
working as
invita a
informal
formar parte de la planta de
recyclers.
selección.
We invite them to be part of the
Inclusive
plants,
en la
the
parte
selection
de la
plants,
planta de selección de San Juan de Aragón, que es la más nueva, que está
particularly the
aquí en
San
la Ciudad
Juan
de
de
México,
Aragon
pues
plant
también
in
hay una
Mexico City,
parte
which
de
is the
la
newest.
planta
There's a part of the plant
que recuperó, o vamos a decir,
that
que
recovered
contrató a los
or
trabajadores
contracted
informales que ya
workers,
estaban en la
informal
planta de
workers who
selección
were already
existente y
in the
ahora están
existing selection
trabajando en
plant
esta nueva
and are
planta de
now
selección ya
working in
con
this new selection
pues un
plant now
seguro con
with
prestaciones,
insurance
con todo tipo
and
de protección personal, ¿no?
benefits
Que
and
eso también
protection, personal
ayuda
protection
a
gear,
poder
thus
darle calidad
helping
de vida a estos y pues
provide
también ya
a better
tienen un horario
quality of
fijo,
life
un
to
sueldo,
people
¿no?
and
Que
with a
también
fixed
pues eso
schedule and
pues es
salary.
parte de lo que buscamos
And that's
con
part of
estas
what we
estrategias.
intend to do with these strategies.
Perfecto. No, muchísimas gracias a las dos.
Thank you very
Una
much to
última
you both.
pregunta abierta,
And
un
one
minuto
last open
responder.
question, so
Señor
maybe
alcalde, una
answering 1 minute.
como mensaje.
As a message
¿Para
to
dónde va esto?
mayors,
Fomentar la
or
circularidad en las
where do I
ciudades. ¿Cuál es el
where do
mensaje
I
que le quieren
start
dar como
encouraging the
como
citizenship
estrategia?
to participate? What is
¿Dónde
the
parte?
key or
Estefanía y
start
Eva,
point?
lo que
Stephanie and
quieran
Eva,
responder.
what can you say, or what would you say?
Perdona, no escuché bien.
I didn't catch you correctly. I'm sorry.
Ya, repito.
Let me repeat.
Si un alcalde o una alcaldesa
If a
pregunta, ¿por
mayor
dónde empiezo a
asks,
fomentar
where do I
una
start
política de
encouraging
economía circular en una
a
ciudad o
circular
a
economy
nivel de
in a
gobierno
city as a
municipal?
government
¿Por dónde
at
parte?
at the
Un
municipal
mensaje
level? Where do I
algo
start? Just a tidbit, a point of start.
De partida, muy bien, muy bien.
Very
Bueno,
well, I
primero
got it.
por el liderazgo, ¿no?
First,
Eso es muy
it starts with
importante
leadership,
y
which is very
ser
important.
un modelo para
And you need to
seguir.
be a role
Eso es
model to
importante porque
others. That is
también
key
son presente en el público
in order to be
y
present among the
pueden
public
generar muchos,
and to
pueden crear
generate
mucha
or create
inspiración y muchos
a lot of
cambios.
inspiration and change.
Excelente. Estefanía.
Great. Estefania?
Coincido con Eva que
I agree
necesitan
with
tener
Eva.
una figura de
There's a
liderazgo que
need to
nos
have
permita
a leadership
que
figure
todo
that
se enfoque
allows
hacia este tema de
everything to
economía
be focused
circular,
toward
que
the circular
no se
economy.
desvíe de esto, sino que
Do
tenga
not
realmente las
deviate from
capacidades
this, but
técnicas
to
para poder
have the
pues,
technical capacities
ajustar todas
to
estas
adjust
estrategias a este
all of
enfoque.
these strategies
Y yo
towards this
sinceramente no diría que
focus.
partiría como de un
And
solo lugar,
I
sino más bien hay que
would
empezar
say
como
that
con
we
diversos
need to
puntos,
start
empezar
in
a
diverse
fomentar en la
points
ciudadanía un consumo
and
responsable a través de
to
capacitación, también
encourage
hablar con las empresas, o sea, no, y pues también
good
también con los
management among
representantes técnicos,
citizens
empezarles a
and
enseñar
in
sobre este tema de
public
economía
spaces to
circular, porque hay
teach
muchas acciones
citizens
que se
about
hacen desde
circular
gobierno
economy because there are
que
many
cuentan con atribuciones,
activities
pero
carried out
realmente
through
no
the
saben que
government
tienen este
and
enfoque
there
de
are many
economía
powers,
circular.
but
Entonces, yo no diría
people
que
don't
hay un
know
punto de
about the
partida,
circular
sino más bien
economy focus.
que hay varios y que
So
se puede ir
we
técnicamente
need to tell them that there are several starting points where we can go. So it's a sort of a
Ok.
big bang.
Bueno, muchas
Well,
gracias Eva,
thank
muchas
you,
gracias
Eva
Estefanía,
and
muchísimas
Estefania,
gracias
for your time and your
acompañarnos en esta
presentations
sección.
and
También muchas
for
gracias a Bart
your
y a Tiago
answers.
que estuvieron en la
Thank you to Bart
información.
and Tiago who
Con esto
were with
damos
us
por cerrado
before.
las
And this closes the
presentaciones, las
presentations
preguntas
for
y
today
para el cierre
and
lo
the
dejo con
Q&A.
María Camila
And
y les
now
pido
I
que
give the floor
quédense
to
con
Maria
nosotros
Camila.
un par de
Camila,
minutitos para
stay a
una
couple minutes with
encuesta. Y
us
yo me despido,
for a
muchas
poll.
gracias.
Thank you all.
Muchísimas gracias. Gracias,
Thanks,
Alfredo.
thank you
Quiero
all. And
agradecer a todas las
Alfredo, I want
personas
to
que nos
thank
acompañan,
everyone
que nos han
who
acompañado
are
hoy, en
joining
especial
us Today, particularly,
presentadores, a las
particularly
personas
our
que nos contaron sus casos
presenters,
en la primera
the people who
sección
told us our
también.
cases in
Creo que han
the first
sido
session, the
días
first
muy duros
section.
en las
I think
ciudades y
this
nosotros nos quedamos
this has
con
been a
muy
great
buenos
work
insumos
between the cities,
de la
and we get
conversación de hoy.
some very good information about
Gracias, Alfredo, por
from this
moderar,
conversation.
gracias
Thank
al
you for
alcalde,
your
al
moderation.
profesor
Thanks to the
Tiago
Mayor
Gorski,
Tiago
a
Gorski,
Estefanía,
Stefania,
a Bart y a
Bart,
Eva
and
por compartir
Eva
con nosotros
for joining us
todas estas
today
valiosas perspectivas y experiencias
and
en la
sharing
gestión
their
de los
perspective,
residuos sólidos
perspectives
urbanos.
in the management of
Es
solid
fundamental
waste in
conocer
urban
las
areas.
estrategias
It is key to know these
y los enfoques
strategies
innovadores
and the
para
innovative
enfrentar
focuses that
estos
allow us to
desafíos en
face
nuestras
these
ciudades,
challenges in our
de poder
cities
contar con
in
experiencias
order
concretas como las que se
to
han
have
presentado
concrete
hoy,
experiences such
que
as
nos
the one we
muestran
presented
que
today
es
that show
posible
us
avanzar hacia
that it is
ciudades más
possible
limpias,
to move forward
sostenibles, con un enfoque
towards more
claro en la economía
cleaner, more
circular
sustainable
y
cities
en la
using circular
participación
economy
ciudadana.
and community
Espero que las
participation.
lecciones y las
I hope
experiencias
that
que
the
hoy nos
lessons
han
and experiences
compartido
we shared
nuestros
today
panelistas hayan sido
our
utilitarias
panelists
para
are
nuestras
useful
ciudades y
for
que
our
contribuyan
cities
a
and our
promover
citizens,
la
and that they
co-creación y la
contribute to promoting
implementación de
cooperation and
soluciones
implementation
efectivas
of effective
para la gestión de
solutions
los residuos
for
en las
waste
ciudades de América
management
Latina y
in
el
Latin
Caribe.
American and Caribbean cities.
Antes de cerrar,
Before
quisiera
closing,
pedirles,
I
invitarlos
would
a
like
que
to
respondan
invite
la
you
encuesta
to
escaneando este
respond to a
código
poll by
de
scanning the
QR
following
que
QR
estamos
code that is
compartiendo en
going
la
to appear.
pantalla
There you go.
y que también estamos compartiendo en
Leave
el
us your
chat.
opinion there, and you will
Para
also share the
pedirles que
link
por
in the
favor
chat
nos ayuden a
so
contestar
that
esta
you can
encuesta para
please
que
answer the
podamos
poll
mejorar
so that we
y
can
tener cada
improve
vez contenidos que sean de mayor
and to
utilidad
have
y
more
calidad
and more useful
para
content
ustedes.
for you.
Así que les pido por favor que puedan escanear este código y
So
nos
please
puedan contestar
scan it or
la
follow the
encuesta
link in the
sobre la
chat
sesión
so
de hoy,
you can
por favor.
answer the poll about today's session. Thank you very much.
Bueno, mientras van llenando la encuesta,
While you fill it out,
yo me
while you fill
despido
out the
agradeciéndoles a
survey,
todos ustedes por habernos
I
acompañado
thank
hoy
you
en
all for
esta
joining
serie de
us
webinars.
in
Esperamos que
this
se puedan
series of
unir la
webinars.
próxima
We hope that
semana.
we can join us
Los
next week.
esperamos el próximo miércoles 11
We,
para que
we will wait
conversemos
for you next
sobre
Wednesdays
la
to
calidad del
talk
aire y
about the air
aprendamos cómo
quality
podemos
and
mejorar
for us to
la
learn
calidad
how we can
del
improve
aire urbano.
the
Así que
quality of
muchísimas
urban air.
gracias y
So
muy buena
thank you
semana
all
para
for joining
todos.
us and have a great rest of your week. Goodbye.